Once upon a time, I was in the Navy, and I volunteered for submarine duty and duty, and not knowing what it would entail. And then after a few years of training and how to operate nuclear reactors safely, I got assigned to my first duty station, duty, um, and it was in Groton, Connecticut, the submarine capital of the world. That's what they would call it. Funny thing about Groton, Connecticut, is it was called Sub Base New London, which was actually across the Sound or river, I forget, from where it was, because back in the day we thought it would fool the Russians of where the sub base actually was. So anyways, it was in Groton, but we called it Sub Base New London. And New London, again, was across the river because we were freaking smart back in the 50s and fooled those Russians. Anyways, I ended up at my submarine, or ended up at the sub base, and they were out to sea doing some sea trials, and so I thought that I wouldn't have to meet up with them for a while, so I got to like just freaking have a sweet life, and went and checked in and hung out, maybe cleaned for like half an hour, and then got to go home for a couple weeks. And they're supposed to be out for I think a month, so I was like, oh, this is gonna be sweet for a whole month, get paid full pay, and not have to deal with ship life. So anyways, after 2 weeks, they're like, you know what, send that guy out here, because they needed a part for something anyways. So they're like, throw that guy on a sub tender, and send him out there. So I had to show up to my first ship, a submarine, and not knowing what I'm getting myself into, and have to show up. I believe I showed up in my dress uniform too, because that was what the... Yeah, so I'm sitting there in a freaking wool sailor outfit, like a goon, show up and have to hop from a sub tender onto a cylinder in the ocean, which the crazy thing about a submarine is it's a very smooth ride underwater. Once it starts letting water into its ballast tanks, and it can sink, like, you get a few, a little bit underneath the current, and it's smooth sailing, if you will. And but when it's on the surface, because it's a tube, it's just going like this. And so I have to hop on this plank, and I'm thinking, shit, like they're gonna set me overboard in my dress uniform, and I'm gonna die looking like an idiot. But luckily I made it. Almost fell over, because again, it's shaking. And I get on this sub, and I go down there, and just 100 dudes staring at me like this fucking nub. That's what we used to call us, non-useful bodies. So when you first get there, you're not qualified in any watch station, you're a nub. You're a non-useful body, so you constantly get harassed. Like, this nub, blah blah blah. Anyways, what I want to tell you about is how I got disqualified submarine duty. So I got there and spent 2 weeks out. I did some work, started my qualifications, got semi used to the shitty sub life style of 12 hours on work and 6 hours off. 12 hours on, 6 hours off. That's what you do when you're out to sea on a submarine, or what you used to. They've changed the time frames now. But now it's 8 and 16, or 16 and 8 if you're a nub. Anyway, so did that. Went back to port, was there for a little bit, and then went back out for like 2-3 months. And I'm out for 2 to 3 months in hell, you know. I mean, like, I feel like a zombie, and I got qualified super quick on my first watch station. I started staying in watch right away because they're shorthanded. They kind of pushed me through the quals, and I'm, you know, working this terrible schedule. Like, once you start getting qualified things, or once you're fully qualified of all the watch stations, and you get what's called your dolphins, which I never got. The schedule is 6 hours on watch at the time, and then 6 hours of free time and 6 hours of sleep. And sometimes people would sleep during the free time or watch movies or play video games or whatever. You know, fuck in the shower, or you know, jack each other off, whatever. You know, sub life. They used to say, you know, 100 dudes go down, 50 couples come up. Sub life. Anyway, I did the 12-6 thing because I was a nub, and after, you know, 30 days of that, or even sooner, I was just like out of it. You know, I'm sharing a rack, so they have limited space for racks, and if you're the new guy, like, you got to share a rack with other people. So I'm like getting off of 12-hour shifts, tired, dirty, and climbing into a nice warm bed because somebody else was just sleeping in it. It was fucking gross. So I'm hating this, and eventually we end up in, after, I don't know how long we're out, 60 plus days. And what limits your time out to sea is food. So there's no nuclear powered subs can last, you know, forever out to sea, as far as power, and, you know, it can, you know, using reverse osmosis purify the salt water, so you got plenty of water, but you're limited by food. And so, like, they don't normally let you stay under without getting a food re-up for at least, you know, 3 months max. So anyways, we've been out there for a while. We've pulled in Virginia Beach, Newport News, whatever, Norfolk. And I had asked my wife at the time to meet me down there just to spend some time together and hang out at the beach. And I was out with my dog, not this dog, my old dog named Bandit, and was running around, and I had already fucked up my knee, and like partially tore my ACL a few years earlier, or a year or two earlier. Anyways, this time fully tore it. And so I told my command that I just hurt my knee, and they did some x-rays, which doesn't show anything about your ACL. But, you know, they wanted to throw me back on the ship and then continue on for the next, I don't know, we had like another 3 months out. And I was like, I can't go down in this tube. Like, I can't put any weight on my leg. Like, I'm not gonna be able to climb down this ladder to get down to the ship. And they wanted me to, real bad. Kept forcing the issue, being like, pussy, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just trying to belittle me to give in. And I was like, no, I can't walk on my leg. I'm not going down in there. So eventually they agreed to fly me back, and I go back and see a real doctor. Well, you know, it was a Navy doctor, but a real Navy doctor instead of those fucks that they were setting me up with down there. Anyways, they do an MRI, and they're like, oh yeah, your ACL's gone. And anyways, I have ACL surgery, and so while I'm recovering from ACL surgery, they put me on limited duty, which is just a cush job that you get when you hurt yourself. So everyone's from my ship that I knew briefly saw me around base, you know, when they got back, and they're like, pussy, like, you know, like, oh, your knee. I'm like, yeah, you know, I had to have surgery on it, and now, you know, I'm recovering, like, I'll be back eventually, like, calm down. But in my mind, I was like, God, I hope I don't have to go back. Like, that shit sucked. Like, and I knew there was a way to, if I could, get out of the submarine duty. And so I started researching online, like, what's the best way, foolproof way to get out of submarine duty. And it just so happened to be an alcoholic, and cheers to that. And was having, pretty nasty shits all the time, diarrhea, and had some hemorrhoids, I guess. And anyways, I was having blood in my stool, and but it wasn't a new thing. I just ignored it before, but now I was like, well, this is a good opportunity. I saw online, like, if I could get some kind of diagnosis from my bowels being a problem, then they're not going to let me back on it. So anyways, I should rewind. Every submarine has what they call a dock, but they're not really a dock. They're a corpsman. They're basically a glorified nurse, like what's that word? Where they triage, like a triage doctor. They're, like, oh, you're dying? No, then get back out there. So anyways, the doc on my ship I met when I first showed up, and I had to get like different shots and other things, and briefly had interactions with him. Anyways, he'd gotten taken off of his sub duty and was doing a brief stint on the base. And so when I went in to complain about my ass bleeding, lo and behold, it was my doc from my ship. I was like, oh shit, what's up, doc? Yeah, so I got blood coming out of my ass. It was like I got pretty bad stomach pain, and he's like, oh, well, I guess we'll have to check to see if you're telling the truth. So he just won't take my word for it. So he has to, ask me to drop trowel and drop my trousers and bend over and lubes up his fingers and fucking shoves them in my ass. And, the Navy way. And they have this test called the occult test that I, researched about later, and I think asked him about maybe a little bit. But anyways, he just like wipes his lubed up shit fingers from my asshole onto this thing, and then it turns like a color if it's in the presence of blood. And so he's like, oh, you do have blood in your stool. I was like, I know. And so he sends me to a real doctor further up on base at the hospital there. And now they want to, check to see if I have like a bleeding ulcer or, some kind of problem with my GI tract, my gastrointestinal tract. And so first they get me all fucked up. They put me on some kind of combo. I don't remember what kind of medicine it is particular, but what I was told at the time, it was like a combo of like morphine and alcohol or something that they mainline you with. And man, it was like the most fucked up I've ever been. And the first time they go down, because they're thinking that, I'm having stomach pain, bleeding, that maybe I have a bloody ulcer. And then they go up, and I'm glad they didn't go up and then down, because that would have just been gross. So luckily they went, the right way, and they went down my throat as I'm all fucked up, and they find, and I get to like watch it as I'm like the most faded I've ever been in my life, and I'm like, oh shit, and I see this bloody ulcer in my stomach, and I'm like, whoa. And at the time I'm like, that's a good sign, like that's something that'll get me sub-disqualified. But just to make sure, they do a biopsy of it, make sure it's not cancerous. It's not. They check to see if I have the bacteria that causes a majority, like 90% of ulcers are caused by bacteria. And it wasn't caused by bacteria. And so they want to go up the other end just to make sure I don't have anything else, causing this, I guess. And so then they, again, get me all fucked up, and I gotta go back and drink all these terrible laxatives to make myself shit my brains out and fast for like a day. So I do that, and then I go in, they get me all fucked up, and I'm again, aware, and I think it's the one where they go deeper in there or something. They got to keep you awake because they got to make sure they're not like fucking up your intestines as they, put that snake up there. And the whole time they're like blowing air too, and both times. So like when they went down, they blew a bunch of air. So when I was down, I was like burping a whole bunch. And then this one I was super excited about because they were blowing air up my ass. So when I got done, I was farting a whole bunch. So my wife loved me for that. And anyways, going through that procedure, and they don't find anything through my GI tract that's concerning. And so they just kind of chalk it up as, he's got, he had ulcers. They think maybe it was from they're giving me like 1,000 milligrams of ibuprofen at the time. That's like equivalent to like 5 Advils. And that was like multiple times per day, like a big horse pill of 5 Advils put together, take 2 every 4 hours or something. It was crazy. Like I was taking a insane amount of Advil on top of, the same amount of Percocets they gave me for my leg too. I mean, you think civilian doctors give you a lot of Percocets. Navy doctors must have even bigger kickbacks from the pharmaceutical company, because I was just like, how's your pain level? I was like, that's not so bad. And then my doctor was like, well, here's 100 Percocets, for the next 30 days. And I'm like, sweet. And then after I got addicted to those, he was like, I went back and I was like, yeah, I'm still hurting. And he was like, I'm gonna give you 100 more. I'm like, sweet. And then eventually I'm like hooked, and I'm like, hey man, doc, I need some more fucking perks. And he's like, I can't keep giving, you've had 200 in the last 2 months. He's like, let's switch you to something else. And so they put me on like Vicodin for a while. And then anyways, they just kept stepping me down on different, the tramadol was the last one. But I was on that for several months. And on top of, all this other shit that probably took years off my life. Anyway, I went to get a doctor's checkup when my leg was, I was going through physical therapy for a while, and my leg was probably fully healed. At least I had good range of motion. I could walk with a normal gait, which is just how you can walk normally, not look like a retard. I'm sorry, R word. And so I'm not walking like an R word, and I got full range of motion, but my stomach's still all fucked up. So I go back to the doctor to get cleared for submarine duty again. This is like, 8 months later. And so I'm just happy that I got to stay off that submarine for 8 months. I missed a deployment and everything. And the first doctor I go see, I'm telling him about the stomach issues I was having, which I knew were submarine disqualifying. I was like, yeah, doc, I got, I had an ulcer, and they diagnosed me with GERD, which is like a gastro reflux, which I still suffer with. Like, throw up in my mouth a little bit every once in a while. It's gross. And so reflux and, stomach issues, and I was having diarrhea. It gave me irritable bowel syndrome diagnosis and all these other things. And it's mostly because I was just eating shit and drinking an insane amount of beer. But they told me it was all these other things and had me see all these different specialists out in town. And anyways, I have all these things, and I'm like, all right, this is, fucking aces. I'm going to go in there. I'm just going to be like, look, like, get me out of here. Put me on a surface ship. Like, I thought it was going to be much better. First doctor must have been told that he could not disqualify, or he must have reached his max limit of how many people he could disqualify for the month. So he gave me all the pushback in the world. I was like, no, you're fine. And like kept being like, no. And then it just kept telling me to go see other doctors and blah, 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 and then come back. And so I kept doing it. I kept jumping through the hoops because I was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get the fuck off of this shitty submarine. Like, I did not want to be a fucking zombie again, 12 hours on, 6 hours off for months at a time. Like, it takes a toll on your mental health and just your body. And so I was over it, and I was like, if I can do anything to get off of this ship and out of Connecticut. I fucking hated Connecticut. No offense to anybody in Connecticut, but the place sucks, especially in the winter. And I knew if I was going to get up on, the only other nuclear powered vessels in the Navy are in warmer climates. So I was like, I'll end up in Washington or San Diego or Virginia. So let me get on that level. And so, I went, and again, the doctor not having it. And so eventually, I think like on the fourth visit back, after going and seeing all these different specialists to talk about my stomach problems, I see a different doctor, and he's, second I go in there and I tell him all the things I got, he's just like, oh, wow, yeah, like, it's pretty cut and dry. Like, you are not, these things say that you can't get back on the submarine. He's like, you're submarine disqualified. And I was like, fuck yeah. And so it was like the news I wanted to hear. So it was quick, fucking sign some paper. And then I just put in for new orders and ended up going to San Diego. And the rest is history. But I don't know. I thought that was a pretty funny story. Pretty telling for how I've lived my life, trying to skirt out of shitty situations I've got myself into. So, take that for what you will. But good times. I got the experience of being on a submarine just long enough to realize that I didn't want to fucking ever do it again. And anybody who's trying to make that decision, if they should volunteer, because you have to volunteer for submarine duty in the Navy. And if you're considering it, the extra pay is not worth it, from my experience. But who am I?